So what is the real risk if governance isn't built in to the architecture from day one? And, I'd love to understand like how you as the CEO, but also Lineate and your offerings, how do you kind of think through that problem proactively?
One is we're talking about after the fact, but the truth is, if you're making a lending decision, you need to know exactly why you're making that lending decision when you make it. If you're having to defend this to an auditor or worse, you can't be in the situation where you're saying, oh, this is why we did it. It may look like a non-compliant reason, but at the time, this is what we meant to have done. A simple example, the Fair Housing Act says you're not allowed to discriminate in mortgages based on race. But now you're using a data set and you're asking a machine learning algorithm to pick up certain factors, and the machine learning algorithm discovers some pretty interesting factors that you didn't know were there. And those factors could include basic things like income and zip code or geographic region. But one thing that might be happening is you might actually be just creating a proxy for race, so that what your machine learning algorithm is doing is effectively discriminating by race, even though you didn't realize that's what you were asking it to do. And that's, one of the real dangers of using AI. And the data that's coming in is full of all the biases and other problems that afflict the rest of us. So you really can't look to AI as some sort of impartial referee to overcome the flaws in humanity. It's more like a magnification of humanity than an impartial arbiter.
We're all moving at speed. There's many models out there. We don't necessarily know how they had inherently been trained. And I use that term, like a black box, right? When you think about the data, it's hidden behind some wall somewhere. You've got a model, you don't necessarily know how it's been trained. If you're going to a young fintech, they're moving fast, they want you to kind of use off-the-shelf things that maybe are a bit of a black box that gives them speed. What is the worst case scenario in that environment? What happens if they do use a black box solution?
You take all this historical data that's coming into the system, you train your models on this. Well, of course, your back test looks great. You now put it out into the real world. And once it comes into contact with real world data, it doesn't work at all because you've basically fit your entire model to historical noise. Usually, one of the first things we sort of bump into is trying to figure out how to manage data that's spread across multiple systems and multiple departments. Not only is the data sort of siloed, it's siloed for a reason. And the reason why it's siloed tends to be that these organizations think about the business in different ways that make more sense. There's a lot of concern over what kind of data is accessed, in what way, by whom. And there's a big problem that I think is coming with AI. There are sort of end-to-end applications that have been developed in a traditional way. Because those applications are accessing data in a predictable way, it's pretty relatively easy to control what those applications can and do see, because there's only so many ways they can pull out the data. And that's actually a non-trivial part of how data is actually protected in the real world. I mean, it's just another layer. When you bring AI into this, and you give AI access to these systems, it is essentially accessing it on the fly. We don't necessarily know what it's going to do and how it's going to pull. And that's the appeal of it. But what you've done is you've essentially unwound an implicit layer of data security in your organization. I think that's a concern that people are underestimating right now. And I think it's going to be a big problem we're going to see more and more of.
The example you gave is actually the people in the organization shouldn't necessarily have access to different pieces of information. So it's not just put a wall around everything and everything's secure to the external world. It's also making sure like there's these mini walls around certain pieces of very sensitive information within your organization and giving that control and tools to the data owners as well. Ben, thank you very much for your
Yeah,
time.
thank you, Seth.